freedom isn't the result of wealth. It's the foundation. Welcome to Wealth Independence, where freedom leads and real wealth follows through battle-tested strategies, hard-won lessons, and real-world experience. You'll discover how to accelerate your path to true financial independence. And now your hosts, Dustin Bailey and Adam Penn.
All right, welcome back to the Wealth Independence Podcast, where freedom leads and real wealth follows. I'm Dustin Bailey, and I'm here with Adam Penn. Hi, Adam.
Hey, Dustin.
How are you today?
Doing good. Gonna go do some framing work on a house project we have here in Chico.
Well, don't get too excited about it.
I won't. It's at least it was 90 last week, and we're approaching summer here. It's still spring, but Chico either has like a spring that lasts for 4 months or for 4 days. I'm a little worried this one might be one of those 4-day years, so we'll see. Because then we're about 100 to 110 all summer.
I got you. Is this the photo you sent me? The same property you sent me over the weekend where you installed a skylight?
Yeah, a dormer. We ripped open the roof and put in a dormer. So it's a hefty project, but we'll see what it turns into.
Oh, it'll be good. I know you're excited about that one, so I'm excited to see it come together.
I'm excited to see it done.
That'd be cool. Well, speaking of real estate, which I guess most of our
kind of ties in. I should log those hours.
You should log those hours. Yes, this is very, very relevant to today's No Investor Left Behind episode. We want to talk about reps, like how many curls you can do in the squat rack.
Curls in the squat rack? Is that what you said?
Yeah. People go. You got that's a meme, right? You got the guy that goes and does curls in the squat rack.
Oh, really? I haven't.
Oh,
I just assumed you had never been to a gym before.
I used to spend a lot of time in the gym, so I figured you might make a joke on that one. But yes.
I was going to, but not on the podcast. Who's this gym you've been spending a lot of time with?
We know real estate professional status, REPS, a nice tax benefit that exists to real estate investors.
Classification to qualify for a benefit, right? And
yes.
We're not CPAs. This isn't tax advice.
Thank you for clarifying that. Yes, this is our interpretation of all of this. Please always check with your own CPA, and especially for this, because this is a powerful designation that can save you on your taxes, but if it's done wrong, it can come back to bite you in a hurry. So,
and it's kind of like the short-term rental loophole, quote unquote. But the tax code around short-term rentals has similar hour marks, because we've talked about that before.
Yeah, I guess the best way we can start with just sort of defining it, right? So, real estate professional status is just, as we said, it's a designation that effectively allows you to deduct real estate losses, which would primarily come from depreciation. So losses that ordinarily would be counted over in a passive bucket, you can count against ordinary income. And most usually that's going to be a W-2 job. And so I feel like the way that the most common scenario here would be married filing jointly. You've got one with a high-paying W-2, and you've got another that's a full-time real estate investor. And so they can, because of the one spouse, when they meet the requirements for real estate professional status, they can then deduct the real estate losses against the W-2 spouse's income. And so there's a lot of variations to this, but that typically tends to be the most common that at least I've seen.
Well, what are some of the requirements to get reps?
Yeah, so real quick, what I was going to say, it's powerful, obviously, because real estate investors can accumulate a lot of depreciation losses, and if you don't have the qualifying income to offset that, then they pile up, and hopefully you can use them in the future. But it's a very powerful way to potentially offset income that might not otherwise be able to be offset by real estate.
If one spouse is making enough money, it can totally make sense for the other spouse to just not have the job. Like them not having a job and doing real estate could easily pay whatever their other salary was.
Correct. Which is a great lead into the requirements, because you say not having another job, there's a fairly hefty bar to clear here. So it's a two-part test. So either you as an individual or one of the spouses or both spouses, whatever, you have to spend more than 750 hours during the tax year, so during the calendar year, in the IRS calls real property trades or businesses in which you materially participate. That's sort of the first test, and there's a lot in that, right? So 750 hours, and you have to materially participate, which means you can't just be the check writer, right? You've got to be like doing things.
But that can be finding properties. And once again, this isn't tax advice, but my understanding is it's finding properties, dealing with leasing, talking to tenants, dealing with rehabs.
Yes.
The whole gambit.
Yes. But if you have, say, written a check to your buddy and he's going to go do all the work, aside from that kind of being a securities violation at that point on his part, we won't get into that. You then, simply being the check writer, can't claim real estate professional status because that doesn't meet the bar of material participation. You weren't, yes, you wrote the check, but you weren't materially involved in the project. The other half, the other test, so that's the first requirement, right? More than 750 hours. But then also more than half of the services that you provide must be in either real property or the business, which means that if you have a full-time W-2 job, 80 hours per year, that means now you must do at least 1040, so 1,040 hours in the real estate side in order for it to count. It has to be at least 750, but then also half of anything else that you might do, which again is why, to Adam's earlier point, it might make sense for one spouse, if the income's enough and the benefits are enough, to potentially completely quit, because then it's easier to sort of clear that threshold. Again, this isn't tax advice, but there's different ways to structure this. So that's kind of the test. And it's not, I think the next step of this is obviously there's these hour requirements, and the IRS doesn't just want to take your word for it, right? Like you don't just get to check a box and say, yep, I met that. You can, but then if you're ever audited, you're kind of up a creek. You need to log these hours, and that's a big thing. There's actually there's apps, there's websites and stuff that help people do this, right? Those hours have to be spread out. Are usually spread out during the year, and it might be a couple hours here, a couple hours there, maybe a day or so here, depending on the project. The big point is, if you are planning to go down this path, you have to log those hours, and you got to keep a solid documentation of it in case it's ever called into question. Because this is an area that the IRS will, especially if you've got someone with a high W-2 job and you claim a lot of losses, this can trigger an audit. There's no reason to be afraid of an audit, but be aware that if you are using this and are skirting the system, it can very, very easily lead you down a dangerous path.
I think I was just going to say that, it's a solid part-time job, right? If you're you're talking 2 to 3 hours a day on a 52-week work year. There are days that there's going to be more and there's days there's going to be less, right? It's kind of the whole self-employment entrepreneur thing, and it's not for everyone, but I think the benefits outweigh the downsides. And, there's a lot of ways that you can kind of build these hours.
Yeah, for sure. I think I'll put a link to this full tweet in the release notes, but I won't share it here. But it was a guy who's a CPA that shared a little bit of a horror story of a client who was trying to do this in conjunction with some short-term rental things, and that's a separate thing. We've got an episode on the short-term rental, as we mentioned, the so-called loophole. The documentation matters here, and if you are ever audited on this, it's not just like you have to have logged the time, but the time kind of needs to make sense, right? And he gives this example of a client that logged, I think it ended up being a total of 744 hours that was spread out across 24 stays in this short-term rental. And if you do the math, that works out to 62 hours per stay. There was absolutely no way that was real. They were obviously fudging the numbers, counting time that really shouldn't have counted. I think he goes more into the story here. I think they were counting some of their cleaners' time. It's bad. So the documentation on this is very, very important. More so than anything with this, double check with your CPA before you start claiming real estate professional status. Because
if they don't have a clue of what you're asking, find a new CPA.
That's, yes, also very true. Or if they say that it's risky, well, then in some ways they're right, but hopefully they're going to at least talk you through it and will lead you down the path that you can actually do this. Because it's fine. If you are truly meeting the requirement here, you're spending at least 750 hours materially participating, it's totally fine. It might trigger an audit, but if it's all above board and you're documenting everything, no worries whatsoever.
I've also had it for years and never had an audit, knock on wood. But that's the beautiful thing with the tax code is it's a code, right? It's a set of rules. If you follow the rules, then you shouldn't be afraid of an audit.
True. And sometimes those rules are up for interpretation by attorneys and lawyers and all those things. But yeah, that's a piece of advice I took away from a speech Tom Wheelwright gave one time, was like, don't be afraid of the audit. Like, do things right, follow the code. Like, do what you're supposed to do, follow the established rule book, but don't avoid something because of this perceived idea that it might trigger an audit. Just do things right, and you've got nothing to worry about. I don't know. This one's fairly simple. Again, it's powerful. I think like we said, if you've got people that are full-time real estate they claim this. The most typical situation where you see people trying to get this benefit is, again, you've got one spouse that's hiring W-2 and you've got another that's doing full-time real estate. Where that gets dangerous is you got two spouses both working with W-2 jobs and one of them tries to claim it. And then again, that's totally possible if you met the hour requirement there, but you've got to be able to show the support for it and show that it was more than half of the time that you also spend at your full-time job. So a bit higher of a bar to clear there, but the tax benefit, if you're putting in all that work, that's a lot of work. That's I don't know, what's that turning into, about a
60 hours a week,
60-hour week for an entire year at least. A lot of work, but the tax benefit can be there. And again, it's another good way to make use of the wonderful provisions provided to real estate in the tax code. Adam, any closing parting thoughts?
No, it's worth looking into.
Absolutely. Worth looking into, and not something to shy away from if everything's right. But definitely reach out to your CPA, see if this is something. If it's not something you knew about and you're like, well, shoot, I've been spending 750 hours in real estate for a while and had no idea this was a thing, then probably time to get a new CPA. I think that's a good signal there. But hopefully, if it's not a tool you've been using, hopefully it's a tool you can either put into use or use in the future. Well, I don't have any other thoughts. Adam doesn't have any other thoughts. We'll get on out of here. If you found this very short podcast episode beneficial, do all the things that we always request. Give us a like and a subscribe on YouTube, thumbs up, 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, and whatever in the world it is you do on Spotify. I have no idea, but do all that. Let the computers know you're enjoying this, and we'll get the message out to more people. But we appreciate you listening. As always, thank you so much. We'll catch you on the next episode. Just remember, where freedom leads, real wealth follows. Thanks, y'all.
Thanks for joining us on Wealth Independence. This show is for informational purposes only and is not financial, investment, legal, or tax advice and does not constitute an offer to buy or sell securities. All investments carry risk, and investors should always conduct thorough due diligence and consult with qualified professionals before investing. Until next time, remember, freedom leads and real wealth follows.